What is going on out there, world? It's your boy Tommy on the spot. Thanks so much for checking us out here today on Watch Along Wrestling. It's a very exciting day here today. We are going back 15 years where it all begins again. WrestleMania 20 was held 15 years ago in New York City, right in my backyard. And we're continuing this as kind of our New York vibe that we've been doing, getting ready for WrestleMania 35 here by going back and reminiscing, remembering, going through some retrospectives about these past WrestleManias. And today we have a really jam-packed show. First and foremost, I am excited to be joined by Alex Dorio from the Talking Taker podcast. How's it going today, Alex?
It's going great, man. It's my pleasure to be here and reminisce about certainly one of my favorite WrestleManias, obviously for sentimental reasons since I was there. But I think even if you weren't there, everyone looks back at this one as being one of the best of all time.
Absolutely. And Alex and his co-host Travis White do an incredible podcast, one of the most fun and in-depth podcasts covering the career of The Undertaker, obviously, called Talking Taker. And Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about the podcast and how you guys got this started?
Well, I appreciate that, man. We started back in the fall of 2017. You know, there's so many wrestling podcasts out there, so it's so difficult to try to stand out. But me and my best friend Travis, we've been wrestling fans since we were like 5 years old. We've known each other since we were in middle school, and that's been like our key bond was wrestling. So we pretty much just always talk about wrestling, and we were like, why don't we record this? Like, I don't know, maybe it'll just entertain us, maybe it'll entertain somebody else. But we were trying to figure out a way to do it. And it was right after The Undertaker, we thought he retired at WrestleMania 33. You know, we faced Roman Reigns. He laid down the gloves and the hat and the ring. We were like, man, what a career. It spanned so many different decades. Wouldn't it be cool to not just go through like all these old pay-per-views, but just focus on him, look at his career, kind of tell the story of one guy's career match by match and see how that evolves, also see how the business evolves. Because like we said, you know, he wrestled guys like Hulk Hogan and Giant Gonzalez and Kamala all the way up to, you know, The Undertaker. I mean, he is The Undertaker. He wrestled Roman Reigns. He wrestled Dean Ambrose. He's wrestled guys like Muhammad Hassan, all these random weirdos. Like we just discovered on this week's episode, he wrestled David Flair. He had David Flair's only WWF match. Yeah, it's on the road to WrestleMania X8. I totally forgot about that, but that really happened. So it's just such a unique career. Obviously, you could say maybe there's greater superstars like Stone Cold, The Rock, or Hogan. Yeah, sure, they drew more money over their career, but I don't think anyone has had quite the span, quite the breadth of the career of The Undertaker. So we go match by match through his career. We kind of tell the story of the build-up to each match. We go off in little random tangents of stuff we see on old Raws and SmackDowns, random stuff we forgot about. My friend Travis is a huge Steven Richards Right to Censor fan, so he's always got to stick up for them. And I hated the Right to Censor, so we argue about stupid stuff like that. That has nothing to do with The Undertaker. But then we kind of review the match and try to have fun with it. We try to be entertaining and try to, like we said, tell the evolution of one character and the story of the wrestling business along the way, and you know, in the unique way that we can.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I was listening to because you know, it's WrestleMania season. You go back, you kind of try to listen to different, you know, WrestleMania type podcasts. I particularly enjoyed your guys' podcast you did on WrestleMania 12 and his match with Diesel, because I do think that's an underrated classic, and I appreciated your fan of Big Daddy Cool and going out and doing a Halloween costume for him. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, dude, that's my peak of fandom as a kid. Was like, you know, everyone hates on Diesel as champion, but I was his #1 supporter. I had a homemade Diesel Halloween costume. So yeah, that match does hold up surprisingly well. A lot of people crap on Kevin Nash as a performer, but man, he could go when he wanted to.
Yeah, he's I agree. I think it's an underrated era, especially like, I think we're kind of similar in age, and I think that, you know, growing up, it was like kind of went from Hogan to, okay, Diesel's my next guy, and I'm all in on Big Daddy Cool.
Oh yeah, man, Big Daddy Cool, #1 in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see some of you guys here in the live chat. What's going on there? To Dylan, thanks so much for checking us out here today. The way that we're going to do this show here is Alex is going to join me. We're going to go through a lot of the big themes coming out of WrestleMania, what it was like for him to be there live. I'll tell my heartbreaking story of why I was not there live. Then after that, after Alex heads out of here, I will go through some of the feedback that you guys left me over on Twitter, which you can find me over at Watch WrestlePod. Also, some of the feedback from my friends over on the F4W boards. And then when all is said and done, my buddy Steve Johnson from the Disney 101 pod will join me on here, and we'll go through some of his live experiences as well. So make sure you tune in for the entire thing and leave your memories of WrestleMania 20 in the live chat. I'll get to them kind of in between as well when we get to our feedback session. So thank you guys for checking us out here. All right, so Alex, I guess was this WrestleMania 20? Is this your first live WrestleMania?
It was, yes. So I'm originally from Augusta, Georgia, which, if you don't know where that is, that's where the Masters golf tournament is every year. That's what everyone recognizes it for. It's really nothing else. But we're about 2 hours south of Atlanta. So I was telling you right before we went on, I kind of always, as a kid, and never thought WrestleMania would come to Atlanta, because WWF, they ran in the north, or they ran California or stuff like that. They're not going to come to Atlanta for a WrestleMania, but just hoped it would happen. So WrestleMania 20 was coming along. Me and Travis were both seniors in high school, and I had just started planting this seeds in my parents' brain. Wouldn't it be awesome if you sent me to WrestleMania for my 18th birthday? Or wouldn't that make a great graduation present? Wouldn't that make a great senior trip? And I never really thought that would actually pan out or happen. I just kept saying it sort of as a joke. Obviously I wanted it to happen, but sort of joking that it would happen. And on my 18th birthday, which is in February, went to school that day, came home, went out to dinner with my parents, didn't think anything of it, wasn't expecting anything. And at the end of the night, they were like, so about that WrestleMania trip you were talking about, you really want to go? And I was like, yeah. And they said, all right, well, you and Travis are going next month. And it was just like the biggest, it's still like, I can't believe it happened. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why they sent two 17-year-old kids to New York City unsupervised. Awesome. But I called Travis that night, and he'd already known about it, been keeping the secret from me, and we were off to WrestleMania a month later.
That is incredible. Yeah, no, for me, it was one of these things where I've lived in New York my entire life, and when I was real little, I went to the Fan Fest for WrestleMania 10. But I hadn't realized at the time that you could actually go to a pay-per-view. It didn't register with me until I was a little older that you could actually go and get tickets for this thing. So the idea was we went to the Fan Fest, we did that whole thing, we ordered the show. WrestleMania 20 comes around, and now I've started to go to pay-per-views. Went to SummerSlam 2002, Survivor Series 02. We went my dad took me at 5 in the morning to wait online until tickets went on sale for Survivor Series 02, even though I don't think you needed to go that early. But we did it, and we got to meet Eric Bischoff. So WrestleMania 20, I was like, I want to do this. Let's go on to Madison Square Garden. Let's wait outside, please. Let's go. And my mom had heard that WrestleMania 20 tickets were actually going on sale through a Ticketmaster box in Tower Records, so we wouldn't have to go to the city. So my buddy and I went. We waited in line all night. We got there 5 in the morning to a Tower Records in Long Island, and waited till tickets went on sale. We were second online. We were we got this. We're gonna get tickets. This is great. And then right before tickets go on sale at almost close to 10 a.m., busloads of people show up, and everyone jumps out of the van. We're like, they're going to be so late. They're going to be on the back of the back of the line. What are they doing? And it turned out that they were actually doing a raffle because they wanted to prohibit people from waiting online all night.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So we only had 2 shots to get tickets. Both of us were way in the back of the line. And all those people, everyone who showed up, everyone got 10 tickets each, and they all got to go. And we just sat there dejected and could not believe. And this was before the days of eBay and StubHub and all that. I mean, it was in its infancy. So we just couldn't go, and it totally sucked. And it ended up where that Christmas I had one last gift, and throughout the whole Christmas I was keeping an eye on this one envelope, and I was like, oh, that's got to be WrestleMania tickets. I'm gonna save it till the end because I know that's got to be WrestleMania tickets. And I just kept keeping an eye on it and building up my head the entire Christmas. Oh my God, I'm going to WrestleMania. I can't believe I'm going to WrestleMania. And I opened it up, and it was a note from my parents saying, hey, sorry you couldn't go to WrestleMania, but we're confident you'll get to go in 10 years. And I was like, what kind of gift is that? That's like the worst gift ever. And so I did not get to go. And I sat there and I was like rooting against the show. Like I wanted it to be bad because I was like, I didn't get a chance to go. And of course, like this show, and we'll get into it here, is like, I think it goes down when it happens as one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And then Eddie dies. And I feel like it for a while was like right neck and neck with WrestleMania 17 as like the greatest WrestleMania of all time. So what did you guys think? I guess from a live perspective, did you guys do, I know there wasn't any access that year, right?
There was not, but first I have to say, I feel like your parents might as well have just given you a lump of coal in your stocking. That was just brutal, man. I'm so sorry. My heart just goes out to you. Yeah,
I don't know what they were, as I opened it, I was like, what were you hoping for here? And they were like, well, we wanted to give you something. I was like, it would have been better giving me nothing. This is not better. So yeah, that story stuck with me for a while. Yeah. WrestleMania was the show that eluded me until 2011.
Oh man, but talking about the just waiting online for tickets too, that just takes me back, man. That whole experience is gone for people, and probably for the best. But it was just, I remember we did that for the ECW December to Dismember that we went to here in Augusta.
Oh, so wow.
That only pay-per-view to ever come from Augusta. Happened to be the worst pay-per-view of all time. But yeah, I just remember waiting out for hours for those tickets, man. And it was just such a cool experience that just doesn't exist anymore. It just took me back when you said that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And it is a shame because it would be like kind of, now you try to get tickets, and online it's impossible to get tickets, especially when here in New York, for whatever reason, it is brutal getting tickets for WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But you would bond with people. You'd meet new wrestling fans out there, guys you sit out there for hours with. You'd make new friends doing stuff like that.
Exactly. And then you remember them when the show comes across, and it's like, you have those memories. So it sucks that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, this year it was like tickets went on sale, and I had my phone out for like 3 hours on the way to work, just hoping that they'd eventually refresh for me to get tickets, which isn't any fun.
No, it's not. It's not. But going back to what you're saying, access, there was no access that year. We ended up getting there, which is so weird. Like, WrestleMania 20 was such a momentous one. Why would you not have fan access? But the closest thing they had that we found in New York, we got there Friday, so spent 2 days there. Our hotel was in like Times Square, and we ended up, it was a terrible hotel. It was like the cheapest thing we could afford. It was like the room, this was the size of a hallway. It was awful, but we loved it. But we went to the Toys R Us in Times Square, which of course is not there anymore. But that was incredible. Did you ever go to that? Like
all the time, because that was, for a long time, that was the only place you can go to get Mattel figures.
Oh yeah,
was there in Toys R Us Times Square. All the other ones near me wouldn't have it. So whenever there was a trip to the city, like if I had a work meeting, I'd jet down to Times Square and then like hide the bag of figures underneath my desk at work, because that place was incredible. And they always had a nice display for WWE too.
Yes. So I didn't know if that was only for WrestleMania or if they did that all the time when we went, but they had this awesome WWE display. And they had the Ferris wheel in there, and we were just blown away by that. But also when you went down to the bottom level of it, I think it was the bottom level, they had like a mini access display there. So we had no idea. We just kind of stumbled upon it. But they had like Andre's boots. They had Kurt Angle's singlet. They had the thing where you put your hands in Andre's handprints to see how big they were. They always have that there. And like Ric Flair's robe, I remember. They had these marble, they do them now for WrestleMania. They've done a few for like Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, these big life-size statues. They had some things like that of Booker T and RVD, like doing their poses, just carved out doing their poses, just weird, random stuff like that. But I think we went to that Toys R Us like 5 or 6 times that weekend. We just were like, this is so cool. We got to go see it again. Like, oh my God, we're kids in New York, biggest wrestling fans ever. So that was our access, was going to Toys R Us in Times Square.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've done a little research on this because I too was like, was there access back then? And I know that access kind of started, I think it revamped again for WrestleMania 2000 because they did that WrestleMania all day long thing where they were broadcasting stuff from access. As it turns out, for WrestleMania 20, that was the first year where Access like supposedly wasn't doing that well during the teen years. So they decided for WrestleMania 20, I guess, because remember, this is also during the downturn in the economy. To save a little money, they just decided to get rid of Access. And it actually it was a big deal because people bought the packages. Sometimes folks travel from out of town. They buy those WrestleMania packages and the travel packages, and they were expecting Access. And instead, they ended up setting up some makeshift stuff instead of Access and directing people that way, which sounds like what you were talking about.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. I just knew that it didn't existed, but I guess that makes sense as to maybe why they didn't happen. But it's still surprising, even just because it's 20. That's like a milestone WrestleMania, and in such a strong market for them where they've had Access before. It still is weird to me that they didn't have it. But I guess to make up for it, I guess they brought back the Hall of Fame that year. Maybe that was part of making up for it, which was a big part of that weekend. And we did not go to that, but we did stumble upon the guys just walking around New York City. We found their hotel just randomly.
Oh, wow.
We stumbled upon it right as they were like getting on the vans to go to the Hall of Fame. So I have all these pictures of like behind 20 other people, like Jesse Ventura's shoulder or Bobby Heenan's left ear or something like that. But it was cool since we didn't get to go to the Hall of Fame. We at least saw those guys out on the street, and we were marking out huge for that because I love the Hall of Fame still to this day. It's a little too long nowadays with like Hillbilly Jim giving an hour-long speech. But
that's the worst. That's terrible.
I still watch it every year because it's fun to see the old guys.
Yeah, no, that Hall of Fame too that you're mentioning, that they brought it back, but it was actually in like a smaller. I think it was in like, I want to say the Hilton. It was in like a hotel. It wasn't like the big arenas how they have it today. I think that was the first time they brought it back since '96, and they had that Hall of Fame, and that was the last time they did it like banquet style, which I feel like added to the intimacy of the event. But I'm sure it was like impossible to get tickets for.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, and it's it is cool to be out in the arena. When we went to WrestleMania 27 here in Atlanta. It had a blast being there for that one. So it would have been cool to be there for the WrestleMania 21. But like you said, I like that look, the old school banquet style look. It makes it feel a little different, a little special that way.
Yeah, I've been to the 27 one and the 29 one. The 29 one I brought my now wife when she was my girlfriend, thinking like, I'll bring her to like this upscale event because I didn't know she liked wrestling too much at the time. So I was like, I'll bring her to this nice upscale event. Of course, we get there, everyone's chanting, horrible things the whole time, and she hit halfway through. It's like, all right, this is getting boring. It's nonstop speeches. Where's the action? And I was like, oh no. So, but the Hall of Fame does have a soft spot in my heart too, and that was a great class. You had Bobby Heenan, you had Jesse Body Ventura, a lot of people who were involved in that first WrestleMania. They kind of brought it back for that.
Yeah, and Bobby Heenan's speech, that's one of the all-time best Hall of Fame speeches right there. If that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, I don't know if you're a true wrestling fan. So, it would have been awesome to be there for that. But at least we got to see those guys.
Yeah.
It was a neat little just random New York thing, just running into those guys on the street.
That's really cool. Yeah. So I guess take us through. Did you guys have good seats for WrestleMania? Did you guys? What was it like, kind of being in there? Because I remember my first moment going into WrestleMania 27, my first Mania, and you walk in there and it's like, holy crap, we're at WrestleMania.
Oh yeah, we'd been to wrestling shows before, and it's still. I mean, to this day, when I go to a wrestling show, like a WWE show, and I like go into the arena, I still get, a little bit of chills when I go in there and see the ring, see the setup and all that stuff. It's just so much bigger than life than what you see on TV. So it's just cool to do that. But to do that in Madison Square Garden, like that was the big thing to us, was not only is this WrestleMania 20, but it's MSG. Like that's hallowed ground. If you're a wrestling fan, we got to go there. We got to see Madison Square Garden at least once in our lives. So, you being closer to it, have you been there like multiple times?
Oh yeah. All my big shows growing up, it was like when my dad would take me to shows, it was Madison Square Garden. When my mother took me to shows, it was like Nassau Coliseum because she'd prefer to drive. But yeah, so growing up, that's where I went to all the shows at Madison Square Garden. Went to Survivor Series 02, went to the last show they've had, the last like pay-per-view they've had there. The Survivor Series 2011 when Rock came back and teamed with Cena to take on Miz and R-Truth. So Matt, I love MSG. To me, like that is wrestling to me. That idea of you're walking in there, you're seeing it, and it's just crazy that this year the only event taking place at Madison Square Garden is New Japan and Ring of Honor.
Yeah, it makes me sad that WWE will not run it the way that they used to. I'm glad somebody is. I think that's going to be pretty neat for Ring of Honor and New Japan to do it and bring it back onto the scene a little bit. But yeah, I guess it's a little bit old hat to you to go to MSG, but for us, it was, the first time there was just breathtaking and spectacular, and just to feel so much history and all the awesome stuff that had taken place there. That was enough for us. So it wouldn't have mattered if we were like obstructed view. We would have been fine with it just to be in the building for that night. But we were on the top level and we were facing straight at the entryway. So we were not the highest row. We were a few rows down, but we had a good spot on view of everybody making their entrances. And I feel like, I've only been there once, but I felt like there wasn't a bad seat in the house, especially for that night. So it was, we definitely were not close, but it was good enough for us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. That's what's great about Madison Square Garden is there isn't a bad seat in the house. And I personally, just thinking back, like when you mentioned the entrance, like that old school entrance at Madison Square Garden, where you're in the ring and the hard cam is the entrance instead of the crowd. Like that to me is, if I'm going to a show for the first time and I see that, I'm like, oh my God, like I've seen this on TV, but never in person. So that's really cool.
But I was bummed that they didn't do that night, because like that entrance, there was just a video screen for WrestleMania 20, and they that was the first time they'd ever like set up a real stage in there that I could remember. Which I still think it's an awesome stage. It's one of my favorite setups for an arena is that one. But I was a little bummed. And I guess it worked out for us because we actually faced that one. But I was bummed that they didn't have the traditional guys coming through, like you said, the hard cam way. But at least they put that video screen up, so it does give it that special look and special feel for that night.
Yeah, I think not only do they have the video screen, but I think they also had like a video floor, I want to say.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
which was really cool. And they haven't. I mean, they did that a little bit with 33, with that famous where Orton's coming down and he's got that big like penis-looking snake behind him that he hated so much. But back then it was like. I just remember that because I'd gone back and watched some of the show. I didn't realize also this show is like 5 hours long.
Yes.
Which is like the longest, especially back then. That WrestleMania was not 5 hours long. So I feel like this WrestleMania isn't only the first WrestleMania where you had a 5 hour long show, but it was also the first WrestleMania where it felt like they had a couple of matches thrown in there where they just had to get everyone on the show.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at those tag team matches, the 2 4-way tag team matches, those are just get everybody on the card as possible. And it's funny to me when people complain about WrestleMania being so long now. I'm like, yeah, WrestleMania 20 was 5 hours. And guess what? It was entertaining the entire way through. I mean, there's a couple of throwaway matches for sure, but nobody complained that WrestleMania was 5 hours long because you were into it. And so that just shows you the level of where the product was at back then versus where it's at right now, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that, going back and kind of watching some of the buildup for this show, I feel like there was probably a solid 6-7 matches on this show that once the show started, it was like you couldn't wait to see what happened on the show. And one of the things I thought was interesting, I had kind of put this out there on my on Twitter when it was the exact day of the 15-year anniversary. And I was a little like, I wonder how people are going to react to this. But for the most part, obviously with the Benoit stuff is what I'm referring to, the fact that this is such a moment for Benoit and it's synonymous with him, that whole piece of Benoit with Eddie Guerrero at the end and them celebrating. And obviously that moment, when the whole thing with Benoit happens, that moment to me was a little tarnished. Like it's hard to go back and see that and not be like, knowing what happened. But now 15 years later, it does feel a little bit like maybe time heals all wounds on this one. What do you think?
So that's been a big sticking point for it. We've actually talked about this on our show quite a bit because me and Travis both of us, our favorite wrestler was Chris Benoit, like for years. Going back to WCW, we just he was like a hero, like legit, like this is the guy we want to be like we wanted to be wrestlers. We wanted to be like Chris Benoit. He was the man. And so to be at WrestleMania for his crowning moment, like a moment you really thought back then would never happen. Like WWE would never put the world title on a guy like Chris Benoit. And then to see it happen was just like unbelievable, man. Like we were high-fiving, we were hugging. I still have pieces of confetti that fell out of the ceiling that night.
God, that's awesome.
I have the ticket and I have the confetti like in a little memory book or whatever. So obviously massive Chris Benoit fans. And, when, all the tragedy went down in 2007 and there's like, he went off the rails and killed his wife and child. Like that's what happened. I didn't watch wrestling for a year. Like it broke my heart, like legitimately. And me and Travis both didn't. We were just like, I can't do it, man. Like it just ruined it for me. And obviously that's the least tragic thing that happened that day. Two people lost their lives because of what he did. So me losing my fandom, not that big a deal in significance, but still, I just couldn't do it, man. It just left such a terrible taste in my mouth. Till finally, we got back into it. We started hanging out with some other friends that liked wrestling and, started getting together, watching wrestling on Monday nights. Anyway, to get to your question, it still has a sour taste in my mouth, man. It still does not feel, it's still tinged with something for me to watch that match and really to watch any Chris Benoit match. Like I know a lot of people, are able to separate that and to enjoy his work. And, I will never take away what he did in the ring. Obviously one of the best of all time. And I don't begrudge anybody that goes back and enjoys watching his matches. But for me, I was such a big fan and what he did was so just awful. Like it doesn't bring me like any joy to watch his matches, unfortunately. And that sucks for WrestleMania 20 to be tinged with that, in my opinion. And obviously for others, it doesn't. And that's cool. That's fine. But it's just, man, it's just weird.
It's something where like I have not gone back and watched any Benoit for a long period of time. Like I've been okay with the idea that like WWE's kind of not had him a part of things because I too was a big fan. And for me, it was real sad when this happened. I was like, it was one of these things where like wrestling was just so, like I still watched, but it was weird and it was just like uncomfortable. So going back and watching some of the build for this, it still does feel uncomfortable. Like even though that main event is a great match, that three-way is awesome. It was something where it's still hard to go back and watch.
Dude, the moment, the end of that match is one of the best endings of any match I've ever seen. Just and being there in the crowd was just electric for it. Everyone was just chanting tap, 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 and he rolls over. Triple H rolls out of it, and Chris Benoit walks back. Oh, it's the best. But I'll probably never watch it again. I'll probably never watch that match in full again, just because it doesn't feel as important. It doesn't feel as cool anymore. Just knowing what he became.
Exactly. And I will say, I mean, one of the things you did mention there was Triple H tapping. And this was really during that infamous reign of terror of Triple H, where he's gone through everybody. Goldberg comes in, he goes through him. Steiner comes in, he goes through him. He beats Booker T, hits him with the pedigree at Mania 19, takes forever to cover him, goes through him. And he's just gone through everybody. So being a fan of Benoit at that time, did you think that it was a foregone conclusion Benoit was going to win, or did you think, pedigree 1, 2, 3?
Well, as a knowledgeable wrestling fan, I felt pretty good that Chris Benoit was going to win because that's where the story was going. They were telling the underdog story with Royal Rumble and all of that. But being a wrestling fan, never to trust your instincts until the bell rings, until they count 1, 2, 3. So I felt good about Benoit winning, but it definitely felt like I'm not gonna get too excited about it till it actually happens because they could have told a great story with Shawn Michaels winning too, or Triple H, the heel. He was the first heel to go out on top at a WrestleMania in the main event. So why not do it again for all the reasons you mentioned? Just like he beat Booker T when he absolutely should not have. So yeah, I felt like it definitely had a chance, but there was definitely a lot of doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, that whole ending sequence there with Benoit and Guerrero coming down, this is really a month after the crowning achievement for Eddie Guerrero, winning the title over Brock Lesnar. But on this particular show, he has a great match with Kurt Angle. Did you feel like him having that title before WrestleMania took a little bit away from this big win over Angle? Or do you feel like it would have meant more for him to, do you think it would have been more for him to win the title at Mania? Or do you feel like this, was still a great moment because he beat Kurt Angle?
I could see where you could say that, where maybe it would have been cool if they both won the title at WrestleMania. It would have made it a special moment. I guess I haven't really thought about that, but I could totally see that. But then if you do that, you lose the No Way Out match with Brock Lesnar, which was so, I mean, that's a 5-star match too, right there. And that moment with that crowd, that was probably the perfect moment to put the title on Eddie Guerrero, to be in at the Cow Palace, and having such a great Hispanic crowd and stuff there for him that night. And for him to be the guy to defeat Brock Lesnar, I mean, that gave him so much too. So that would have been cool to have him beat Kurt Angle, but I love the No Way Out moment as well.
Yeah, I thought the No Way Out moment was great. Me personally, going into the show, I was so concerned that I really thought Kurt was going to win that match. It felt like the type of thing where, all right, Eddie's the transitional champion, especially when, and we'll get there in a little bit about Brock Lesnar leaving. Once that comes out, I'm like, they needed to get the title off Brock, so they gave it to Eddie. Good hometown moment. Now they're going to go back to Kurt. And when they didn't, and then you get that moment at the end where Eddie and Chris are in the ring together, it really did feel like, well, this is what they mean when they say, where it all begins again, because here we are, and these guys are, they're the new two faces of the company going into that next era, post, Attitude Era, I guess.
And for all the talk that everyone always gives about WWF being a big man's territory and Vince McMahon loving the big muscled up steroid freaks and all that stuff, look back at WrestleMania 10, like most iconic WrestleMania. Who goes out on top? Bret Hart. Look at WrestleMania 20, milestone WrestleMania. Who goes out on top? The little guys, Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. Look at WrestleMania 30, milestone WrestleMania. Who goes out on top? The littlest guy out of all of those, Daniel Bryan.
Wow, right? Yeah.
Vince McMahon, obviously there is some credibility to it being a big man's territory, but if you look at those very special moments, he does listen to the fans and he will give them what they want sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was just awesome and so unbelievable, because we always doubt that he's going to do the right thing and put it on the guys that the real fans really like, but they absolutely did on this night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was incredible. And you're right. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. He does go with that little guy in those monumental WrestleManias, the guy that it's like every 10 years he goes, all right, you guys are stuck with the company. I'll give you your guy for one night.
It's the underdog story, man. It works every time. Like this Kofi Kingston thing that they're doing this year, it's going to work. And it's going to, when he wins the title, knock on wood, it's going to be an incredible moment, because you'd never thought this sort of underdog would get it. And hopefully he is this year. Yeah,
no, for sure. Well, I mean, you guys do a podcast called Talking Taker, and this is obviously a huge WrestleMania for The Undertaker. This is the return of Undertaker from the first time since Survivor Series 2003, where he was buried alive by Kane, which ended up being the end of the American Badass Undertaker. As a fan of Undertaker, did you feel like this was time? It was a good time to go back to the dead man, or were you feeling the Badass Taker?
We're sort of right in the middle of the American Badass stuff on our show. We've got WrestleMania X8 that's coming out tomorrow or tonight or whenever this goes up. It'll be out late tonight. So we're right in the middle of that era. Travis and I would both tell you we were not huge Undertaker fans growing up. Like, we appreciated him and enjoyed him, but we were not like obsessive, wearing goth makeup, Creatures of the Night type people. That was not us. Like I said, we love Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and that style wrestler. But we really, back in the day, were not big fans of Biker Taker. Just like felt, there was sort of, and you probably remember, there was sort of like a attitude during that time that he was sort of holding people down back then and was not letting young guys come up and that sort of stuff. So we didn't appreciate that, or we had that in our heads from reading stuff on the internet. We didn't know what we were talking about. But so yeah, it was definitely exciting for him to go back to the dead man look for us. We've grown to appreciate the Biker Taker era a lot more by revisiting it. There's some really great moments in matches when you go back and look at it, and some great character work when you go back and look at it too. But I think the feeling was that had kind of gone stale. And the interesting thing, I think, is that the Deadman character had for sure gotten stale, and he needed to make that change. And if he had not ever made that change into the Biker Taker era, then this next evolution back into the Deadman, it would have never worked. I don't think his career would have had the longevity that it would have if he had not made that change. But, you know, it had been 3.5 years or so of the Biker Taker era. It definitely felt like, all right, let's get back to the Deadman. Let's get back to that presence, that aura, and that entrance on that night. So incredible.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's funny because it's funny you say that, because I always feel like with Undertaker, and I believe it was The Lapsed Fan, which is a great podcast. I put it over many times on Twitter. Definitely. They referred to Undertaker as the underseller because he never sells. And as the Deadman, it works because he's a Deadman. He's not supposed to really be selling and garnering any sort of sympathy. But I did feel like, you're right, as the Badass, it kind of just felt like, all right, enough. You know, like, and that one you're going, you guys, you know, I'm excited to hear that one tomorrow for WrestleMania 18, because that match against Ric Flair is the first one where they really start to mention the streak. And I was undefeated. And at the end, he puts up his 10 fingers, I think it is. And it's, or 9 fingers. And it's like, now it's like the streak. But on this night, one of the things I also liked about this a lot was the hype and the idea that Royal Rumble 2004, another tainted event. But during that match, at one point, you know, somebody's supposed to come out and the lights go out quickly. A dong goes off and Kane's just like, oh my God. And Kane does such a great job in building this return of The Undertaker, I think, that even though Taker's not there, that was one of the most anticipated matches of the evening.
Yeah, it was. You know, you knew it was coming. You knew it was happening. But that's the brilliance of it, is that Undertaker doesn't appear during this whole buildup. And they're able to get you excited about a match with one guy not ever there, much less, you know, they never touch. They never have like a tag team match or a 6-man tag against each other. They don't wrestle for 3 weeks on Raw before they wrestle on the pay-per-view. That's such a lost thing nowadays, that you just, I guess Brock Lesnar is the only guy you ever see that with anymore, where he doesn't actually get physical, or, you know, it's just promos. It's just a special way of building stuff up. But The Undertaker had a great way of doing that. And it was because you had so much invested in that Deadman character, and there was such a desire to see it come back, that you were able to get people hyped on something with one of the guys not ever showing up and no physicality at all in this buildup. That's such a unique way to get a match over.
For sure, for sure. And of course, one of the, you know, that entrance is made special, you know, with all of the fire, with all of the Druids, but also the return of Paul Bear. What were you thinking when you heard that first, you know, that, oh, yes, and first time Paul Bear shows up after all these years, that being away?
That was probably the biggest mark out moment, was having Paul Bear there. Even then, I was a huge mark for Paul Bear, and you didn't know he was going to come out. We all knew the Deadman was coming, but Paul Bear had not been seen in 4 years, and there was no, from what I remember, there was no buzz about him coming back. So that was just, that took it over the top, that we were going to bring Paul Bear back. And that's going back and doing this podcast. I already loved Paul Bear, but I appreciate Paul Bear on another level. Seeing, like, really appreciating how essential he was to getting the original Undertaker character over. And when you like analyze these matches and him on the outside and the things that he's doing, the way he would like orchestrate the crowd, basically, such a lost art, the manager that could do something like that. So having him back was perfect.
Absolutely. And especially he's got the urn back. And there's this moment during the match where Kane kind of looks over at Paul Bear, and Paul Bear just picks up that urn and starts grabbing the crowd with that other hand, and the crowd's just rising. And it's really good stuff. And just hearing that Madison Square Garden in unison of moments after you hear them completely crap all over something else, in unison, Undertaker, that classic chant is it's a great moment. And it's something where, like, to this day, if he comes out at WrestleMania this year, the crowd will go crazy for him. Oh,
they will, for sure. And that's how it was in New Orleans last year. We sort of the same thing. We never saw Undertaker going into that build up, and even when you got the program at WrestleMania last year, it had a big question mark over Undertaker's face.
Really?
It had John Cena Undertaker in there, but then it just had a big question mark. Like,
Wow,
cool. Is it going to happen? But when he showed up, that was, the loudest that crowd ever got that night, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. On not as bright of a note on this show, when you go back and look at it, this show did feature the first ever encounter between Bill Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, with Stone Cold as the special guest referee. And I think it was being a guy, at the beginning stages of my, reading internet websites and different things like that. I had known Goldberg was going to leave, but I was unsure Lesnar was. I never even heard Lesnar was. So when this comes out that they both come out, I'm like, the crowd should be behind Lesnar here because he's our guy. He's going to stay. And instead, the entire crowd just craps all over this match.
Same deal for us, man. We always knew Goldberg was going to be there for like a year. That was pretty well known. He had the 1-year contract. But the Brock Lesnar stuff, I remember, we were in New York for like 3 days before the show, or 2 days. And obviously 2004, we didn't have cell phones with the internet on them. So we weren't like scrolling news sites or anything.
Right.
So we didn't really know the Brock Lesnar stuff. And I think I have tried to avoid wrestling news sites for like the whole week beforehand. Cause like, I wanted to be there for WrestleMania. I didn't want any surprises ruined or anything like that. So I guess we knew a little bit that there was talks. Maybe he was unhappy, but I don't think we were sure that was going to be his last match. Me and Travis were, at least. So when the entire arena starts crapping on that match and doing the na chants and, this match sucks, all the awful stuff they were doing, we were just like blown away. Like, what is happening? Why is everyone hating on this? Like, it was so weird. And obviously what they did in the ring ended up being terrible, but the people were ready to boo that. It wouldn't have mattered what those guys two did. That crowd was ready to just dump all over that match, no matter what happened.
Yeah, it's crazy. And do you know, and I had done some, because I was doing some research on this show leading up, do you know who, at least in the Observer, that they reported being in the crowd that night, kind of revving up the crowd?
Nah, hit me with it.
Shane McMahon.
Really?
They threw Shane O'Mac out there, and he was screaming, "You sold out," and just having the time of his life, laying into these two guys and getting the crowd all excited. And so, it was one of these things where, back they were like, screw them. You know what? Just crap all over them. And I was at the Raw the night after this, because that was my consolation prize heading to New Jersey for Raw. Okay. And it did feel weird because these guys were such a part of the storylines for so long. Following this, they're out of WWE, so it really was nuts. And at least Stone Cold was there to take some of it in. That
is wild that they basically orchestrated that reaction on there to bury those guys on their way out. But I totally believe that. I never heard that before, but that makes a ton of sense now that you think about it, how orchestrated that all was. And it's like, we were disappointed for sure, because we, being from Georgia, we were huge WCW fans. Like, that was what we grew up on in a lot of ways. And Travis was at the Georgia Dome when Goldberg won the title, that historic moment. Yeah, I had bad grades or something. I couldn't go that night. But he was there, so it was like, dude, Goldberg at WrestleMania, it's going to be sweet. And then that happens. That turd of a moment happens. So it was just so weird, so bizarre. But that explains it, man. Shane O'Mac. Yeah, Shane O'Mac in the crowd, leading everyone there. So I hadn't heard that till I was doing some stuff on this. And when I kind of was doing some stuff, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, typing up some stuff, it was like, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, Shane McMahon. I was like, wait, Shane McMahon. So one of the other things that I always take away from this show, kind of talking about Shane McMahon, is that opening package. And I don't know if you remember it, but they have this opening package of, WrestleMania, WrestleMania 20, where it all begins again. You get this great shot of Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, and Shane's son, like as a baby, right before they go to dark. And I always that to me is just such a great, that when I think of WrestleMania 20, when I put the photos on Twitter about it, I always go back to that moment there. Dude, I mean, I feel like I sound like a shill for the WWE this whole time we've been talking, but it's just because it's such a great show. But yeah, the video package they're second to none. The moments that they have like that, and that's just a perfect example for it. It's so cool to have 3 generations of McMahons on there. These guys that have brought us everything, and I know lots of people complain about seeing too many McMahons on TV, and that, you know, for sure there are times when that happens, but for that moment, for that time, that gives you goosebumps too, to see that and to see, you know, what could be for another generation.
Absolutely. And it's something where, you know what, 20 years, WrestleMania, he can give himself a pat on the back for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then probably, you know, the show kicks off with John Cena and The Big Show. And, you know, I think if you're going down the highlights of the entire show, I'd say the next big thing that's on that show is the next big thing in John Cena. And he comes out, and the Garden is, you know, I was just stunned because typically Madison Square Garden hates John Cena. This guy gets destroyed whenever he comes to New York. And that night, it was not the case at all. He came out, he had the Dr. Thugonomics gimmick going, and the place just ate it up. They were as loud as they were all night.
If you were not around in 2003 and 2004, you would not believe how over John Cena was with smart marks too, like with the hardcore fans. Like, it was crazy. That's whose t-shirt I was wearing, the like Word Life blue and white John Cena t-shirt. That's the shirt I wore that night. So having him open the show was perfect because he was right at that level. He was just the guy the crowd wanted to see. It's his first real WrestleMania match. He was on Heat the year before. We're doing a rap battle with, like, the rapper didn't show up. I think it was Fabulous.
Yes.
Like that. So he did it with a cardboard cutout. But this was his first WrestleMania match. And, you know, Big Show and him, they have a solid match. Like, that's a perfectly acceptable opener. It's fun. The right guy goes over. Perfect way to open the crowd that night.
And for me personally, like, I didn't obviously now you look at John Cena, you just think like, this guy's jacked to the gills. He's, you know, Superman, all that. But back then you really didn't think about it. So with the fact that, like, he's picking up Big Show, hitting him with AAs right and left in this match is like, holy crap. Like, this guy is really, you know, he's a big deal here. Like, no wonder he's the guy. And people always say, oh, he's the handpicked guy, but he surely earned it if you watch back then. Oh
my gosh, absolutely. I mean, he'll tell you the story. He was almost fired in 2002, like before he came upon this rapper gimmick. He was nothing. He had no personality. He was like tag teaming with Rikishi or Kidman or something, like SmackDown 2002, doing nothing. But he worked his way up because he found this character that, as silly and as goofy it is, it worked. It worked for him, and people responded to it. So when you look at this Mania, I think we all thought, yeah, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, that's the future of the company. But really, it's sort of John Cena's coming out party as the future of the company, his first WrestleMania moment. And here we are 15 years later, and he's been the guy that's carried the WWE for all that time.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy. It really is. And then, you know, not only is John Cena kind of on the rise in 2004, but Randy Orton on the other side of things is big time on the rise in 2004. You know, probably, in my opinion, the best hype for this show in terms of matches is that Randy Orton-Mick Foley feud. Because Orton is just the biggest douche. Like, he is just the most hated guy going into this show. And they do this great promo where Mick Foley, night after Royal Rumble 2004, comes out and he asks Orton to spit in his face again. And Orton's like, well, I'm not just going to spit in your face. And he's like, no, I want you to spit in my face. And then he starts smacking himself in the face and busts himself open. And while he does, he is like egging Orton on to spit in his face until Orton finally does. And Mick cuts an entire promo, busted open with a loogie on his cheek. And like that right there, I thought was just some of the best stuff they did going into this show.
Oh, hands down, man. The Mick Foley, Randy Orton stuff, it's probably the last great stuff Mick Foley ever did, you know, in his career. You know, he still did some okay random things now and then, but this was great. I mean, from beginning to end, the story they told, it was, man, almost like a 9-month story. I think it started like summer of 2003. Like, at Madison Square Garden, right? He like kicked Mick Foley in the stairwell of them on an episode of Raw or something like that.
You're 100% right, because on this show, Orton cuts a promo about how it all begins again from that stairwell.
Yeah, just, I mean, long-term storytelling, man. You can't beat that sort of thing. So going back and looking at it, like nowadays, this match, the Evolution versus Rock and Sock, either that or Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero, those are my two favorite matches going back and watching this show. That Evolution Rock and Sock match is so fun. I mean, it just old school wrestling fun. And Ric Flair doing his version of the People's Elbow, man. Yeah. These guys, three guys, or you got Rock, Mick Foley, Ric Flair, all at the top of their game. Well, Ric Flair's not, but still, you know, he could go back then. And then you got the young guys with Randy Orton and Batista, who would also go on to carry the company. I mean, just the talent, those five guys, how could you not love that?
Yeah, I thought it was, and, you know, it is something where, you know, this is Rock's first appearance, too, since 2003, since the night, when he fought Goldberg at Backlash 2003, and Goldberg's first match there. And so it was really something, and it ends up being his last match for 7 years in the company. So it's a really historic WrestleMania, and certainly something where, like, in that handicap match, if you go back there and you take a look at, you know, this is the only time you get Rock versus Batista, Rock versus Randy Orton, and Rock versus Ric Flair all in one match. It's pretty incredible. That's
a great point, too. And that's one of those that I remember not being very hyped for back then. It was just like, all right, sure. I'm sure that'll be fine. You got to get these guys on the card. They got to do something. I mean, I was hyped for The Rock for sure, but it was just like, I don't know, man, Ric Flair. But, dude, Ric Flair came out and he could perform back then. He didn't have to be the Ric Flair of old. He could just be himself and have personality and go crazy out there. And it was a coming out party for Randy Orton and Batista too. I mean, Batista would go on to be world champion at the next year's WrestleMania. So it is when you go back and look at it, it's a pretty important match in WWE history.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we let you get out on it here, is there any other memories that you have from being there live or from that particular show?
You know, it was just incredible, man. The not just incredible, not the performer. He was not on the card, but
no, he unfortunately didn't make it.
He didn't make it. But the whole atmosphere was like nothing I'd ever been to before. I would still, even with it, you know, being tainted with Chris Benoit and all that sort of stuff, that's still the best wrestling event I've ever been to, the best live event of its kind that I've ever been to. Just the memories of it are so special for being there as a young kid. And like I said, I don't know how we survived New York for 3 days. And 2 kids from Augusta, Georgia. But
it's crazy.
We had a blast. And even the bad stuff on there, like like a Divas striptease, whatever that is, Playgirl, Playboy match.
Right.
And then you got the tag team matches, the Cruiserweight Invitational, all that sort of stuff. It's still a special card with so many incredible moments. And it's just fun to talk about it and revisit it. So I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it here. Our first interview that isn't my co-host over on my Disney podcast too. So I really do appreciate it. I saw you guys post a picture on Instagram and I was just like, I want to know more about this. So hopefully some other folks did as well. And, support Talking Taker. Go check them out. I'll put some of the descriptions in there. Folks can buy t-shirts of you guys as well.
Yeah, we've got a t-shirt store over at tpublic.com. I'm wearing one of them. Taker Easy. That's our
very cool
catchphrase we say at the end of every episode. And we've got a couple other ones on there. They're all on sale this weekend. Really cheap t-shirt sale over on TeePublic. But check us out. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Talking Taker. You can find us on there. We post the episodes. We post like random videos and clips throughout the week on there, sort of telling the story of each match as well. All this stuff you probably forgot even happened. And we have a blast on there interacting with people. We've met a lot of cool people doing that, like yourself. And I will gladly join you any other time to discuss any great memories, shows I've been to, or just, random shows, man. I've had a blast tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, Alex. And best of luck with Talking Taker. I can't wait to hear the WrestleMania 18 episode tomorrow.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take her easy.
All right, guys. So we are now I know that you guys have put through a number of feedback here, and a lot of folks are saying hello there on on the live chat. Matter of fact, Travis White, the co-host of Talking Taker, was able to join in as well. I don't know if I saw he said hello. He said you guys are taking care of business. Aiden Ketchup there said I've never been to a WrestleMania event, but I watched this match with Shawn Michaels versus the Undertaker at WrestleMania 25. That is an awesome match, absolutely. And he said he loves Hillbilly Jim, but yeah, that speech almost put him to sleep. So very, very cool there. We are going to get into some of the feedback there of the some of the he who should not be named is who he remembers most from the show. Joseph James at Joseph W. James put up a GIF that is not funny, but it is funny, of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit hugging it out, holding up the world title belt. At Grank Schmidt, big fan, I guess, of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Chris Benoit is what he remembers most. Our good friend at Red Rebel for Red Rebel of Death said Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle was his favorite match. And we also have at BXTK Jackson said people are going to have their opinions, but Chris Benoit from now until the end of time. But this is just something I refuse to hate. And they put up a picture, obviously, of Eddie and Chris hugging it out. At JM Jordan 25 said, what? No one has said Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg? How shocking, LOL. Triple Threat, though, I know the whole Benoit thing, but still stands the test of time as one of the greatest main events in Mania history, and you can't forget about Angle and Eddie. Switching gears now over to my good friends over at the F4W boards. If you guys get an opportunity, F4WOnline.com, that's Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez, and their site, they go ahead and they do a great job, and the boards over there are some of the most fun you'll have. If you're a big-time wrestling fan, those guys over on the boards are some of the best wrestling fans all around. So go ahead, check them out, and I'm going to get to some of their feedback now. And then from there, we'll welcome in Steve Johnson from my our side gig that we do, Disney 101 Pod, to talk about all things WrestleMania 20. We'll get him on here in a bit. But let's get into some of that feedback from the folks over at F4WOnline.com. And let's see here. I'll pull some of that stuff up. And okay, so I posed a question asking for some feedback as well as some memories of WrestleMania 20. 10 Pounds of Gold over in the board said, while the tag team matches were totally useless, and you could argue that this was the beginning of let's get everyone on the card, which is ironically enough, and I didn't go back and read this feedback too much until today because I wanted to have it fresh as well with all of you guys, of let's get everybody on the card mentality. WM20 versus WrestleMania 20 is one of my favorite WrestleMania events ever. The main event is my all-time favorite WrestleMania match, moment, and triple threat. While there will always be the what-if alternative universe of Benoit remaining on SmackDown to go against Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman, as it was seemingly the plan during the fall of 2003, which I didn't know. That's crazy. That period of the first half of 2004 Raw is probably my third favorite era of WWF, WWE, beyond spring and summer 97 and spring and summer 2000. Benoit being brought over from Raw improved it tremendously, as any combination of Evolution versus Benoit Michaels Benjamin guaranteed a good match every week, and there was no way that Triple H wouldn't main event WrestleMania 20 at Madison Square Garden, but the inclusion of Benoit saved it from the usual click wankfest Hunter usually did during the Reign of Terror. The ending with Benoit tapping Triple H and him and Guerrero hugging and crying was one of those might as well quit watching now because nothing is ever going to top that moment. Never have me and my friends ever yelled so much at the TV for that finishing sequence. Just perfect pro wrestling. And he gives some thoughts on the rest of the card. So he said, except for the multi-man matches, every match had built for months. You had Undertaker returning as the Dead Man character. Then the bell had to ring, which is, I guess, a homage to something to wrestle with. Then the bell rang. There you go. The return of The Rock with his mini feud with Ric Flair. And then it says, I don't think so, motherfucker. And the official switch of Batista becoming Big Dave with him wearing that suit. Christopher's Chris Jericho had a great match with the soap opera storyline done right. Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar had the wildest crowd reactions ever seen up to that point. Molly losing her hair made the women's match memorable. And that is something we didn't even get into. But yes, that women's match there with Molly Holly going bald. And it was on Molly Holly that she went bald. Was one of these things that I think definitely was fun and definitely to look out for. Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero was the only match of their program, but Eddie was firing on all cylinders, and his reversals were insane. Cena versus Big Show wasn't much, but it's a huge WWE, huge in WWE canon since it's Cena's first title, and he was marking out as soon as he got in the ring. Excuse me. And he's 100% right. Cena's about as amped up as we were to talk about Cena. Cena's ready to go when he goes out there. Does a little rap, and it's good stuff. So I remember people crapping on the tag four-ways and cruiserweight 10 by 1 minute gauntlet matches, but at least they were kept short, and Ultimo Dragon tripped on the entryway. You compare this with modern WrestleManias, and WrestleMania 20 is so much better. It's baffling that this is the same company behind all of this. All this under 4 hours, too, and no robots doing commentary. Could you imagine Cole, Graves, and Renee describing the end of the show? Very good feedback there from 10 Pounds of Gold. Thanks so much for doing that. Appreciate it. Haphazard said, it was a good event. I'd much rather the main event have been a singles match between Benoit and Triple H, which we didn't get into here, but Shawn Michaels kind of ends up getting added to the main event. It's supposed to be Benoit and Triple H in there, but it ends up being Benoit, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. At the time, this was a big deal because of the fact that a lot of times this was something where you didn't always see that. So it was something that, was fun. And at the end of the day, Shawn Michaels being added, it was something that had a lot of people really upset when it happened. But I think, even though at the end of the day, the one-on-one match might have meant more because it's WrestleMania, and people always say, a one-on-one match means more during WrestleMania. That said, I personally think that the execution of the triple threat and how good the match was is something that really kind of takes away from there. And I did lose the page, so bear with me here. I'm just pulling that back up. So I'll pull that back up here so you can get to the rest of the feedback from the folks over on the F4W boards. You guys, by the way, can always leave feedback over on Twitter. You can follow me at WatchWrestlePod. I like to talk to you guys on there. It's always a good time, and really appreciate everyone who did leave feedback and everybody who also went ahead and did that. So very cool, and thank you guys again for leaving your feedback and for getting involved here on the show this week. This will not be the only time that we do one of these. I'm going to get into that next week at the end of the show of what we're going to be doing next week. So bear with us. We'll go through there and just picking up at Haphazard's comments there. User Haphazard said, then you have done Benoit and Michaels later in the year instead of Benoit versus Kane. And I do agree. Benoit versus Kane is kind of the deal that really ends up being a problem for Kane. The deal with Kane, where Kane, not only is Kane going against Benoit, but then Kane's the first program for Bryan too. So it's something where, unfortunately Kane was put in bad positions twice, and those title reigns that we were all so excited about for Benoit and for Daniel Bryan end up being something that really just ends up really harboring those title reigns. Main event was 5 stars, best triple threat match ever from user Heartbreak Kid. User S. Cyro said, if it didn't have those 4 shitty filler matches, then there would be no reason I'd call it my second favorite. There wouldn't be any reason I'd call it my second favorite WrestleMania ever. Apart from those, the crap was memorable and the great stuff was great. And I guess the four matches he's probably talking about is that the Playboy tag team match, as well as the 2 fatal 4-way tag matches and the Cruiserweight Open. As I do see that Steve Johnson from our Disney 101 podcast is joining me here today. He has jumped on here. He's dressed up nicely for the occasion of being on here for the WrestleMania 20 retrospective. Yeah, looking good, bud.
All right,
so
if you
we
think
will get to the remainder of that feedback from the folks over at F4W at the end of the show. Steve, how are you doing today?
Good. I've actually been listening for a little bit, listening in on all the good stuff that you guys have to say. So I'm very excited to jump in here now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was, again, thanks a lot to Alex Dorio for coming on here. Really great feedback and really good stuff. Can't be more appreciative that he was able to, give us so much time, and thank him again for checking us out here on Watch Along Wrestling and for joining in on the conversation. And I hope that at some point I get to catch up with Travis White as well. Maybe we'll reconnect next year, and I'll do a WrestleMania 27 roundtable discussion with me and my buddy, and maybe the two of those guys who went to the show. So, yes, it was great, and thank you also for giving us a few minutes here.
Absolutely, yeah, it's my pleasure. So, where do you want to start?
So you and I, for many years, and even when Steve was, if you go back in the archives, Steve joined me for the roundtable discussion about Survivor Series 2002. And we talk about it there, and we're going to talk about it here. The WWE Rock is in full force during this show. Do you remember what band does the theme song for WrestleMania 20?
Oh, that is a really good question. I want to say Saliva.
No, it is the new Drowning Pool. If you remember,
okay.
Yeah, their original singer passed away. Unfortunately, they were one of my favorite bands when he was around, with the Let the Bodies Hit the Floor and I'm Tearing Away and all that. He ends up, they got a new singer, and they had that song. Was it Broken or what is it?
Step Up. Is that it?
Step
is
Up.
That the one?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's our only song without Dave. So Step Up was the WrestleMania 20 theme song, and that is about as WWE Rock as you can get, in my opinion.
It's definitely, it was probably between them and Saliva, or even Motorhead. I know once or twice before Lemmy passed away. Once or twice they also headlined, I think, at WrestleMania 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they played Triple H to the themes. They played Triple H to the ring a couple of different times, and are prominent on this show because not only did they do Triple H's theme, but Evolution. They do the song for Evolution as well. And there's always that great moment where Triple H comes to the ring and Motorhead says something to the extent, I don't remember which Mania it was, where Motorhead says, "We're Motorhead, we're going to kick your ass," or something to that extent. So Motorhead was really, and of course, Creed as well.
Yes.
They had that song where they had like 100 packages to it.
Yeah, there was the My Sacrifice package, right?
My Sacrifice, there you go.
Yeah.
And then, as much as we complain about WWE Rock, I'd take it these days over the 85 different times that we got Flo Rida, we've got Kid Rock through the years. I think the WWE Rock, while it was generic, at the end of the day, I think it suited what was there a little more than some of these other guys.
I think it fit everything well. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the whole atmosphere of it lent itself to that kind of music.
And I do see there, IJHTBD says, "Hey," and thanks for joining us in the live chat there. I completely agree with you. And I think that it's one of these situations where it's a sign of the times. Limp Bizkit, back in the Attitude Era, doing Rollin' for The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Limp Bizkit, way past when they had any reason to be doing anything, as the WrestleMania theme song for WrestleMania 19. It's synonymous. These performances are synonymous with where everyone else is kind of coming from. So, good stuff there. But why don't you get into how you got tickets for WrestleMania 20 and how you broke the news to me and how we remained friends through all these years, because I was clearly going through a major case of sour grapes. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I remember this was one of the many wrestling events that I attended with my cousins, who were really responsible for getting me into wrestling. My cousins, Eric and Justin, they had watched wrestling, and, I would go over to their house to watch the pay-per-views and that kind of thing. And we did WCW, we did WWF at the time, and we even did a couple of the ECW shows. So, you know, it was a little bit of everything. And we actually also would do this thing because we were still on the younger side. This is, you know, like preteen, teenage. And, you know, we weren't really big on the message boards and, you know, reading stuff online and that kind of stuff yet. So we were all fully in the kayfabe, you know, mindset. So we would actually just go and like do our predictions of like who we thought were going to win certain matches for the pay-per-views and that kind of thing. And it was mostly for fun. We did actually have one of those, one of the really fancy replica belts at some point.
Oh, wow.
That would, yeah. So it would kind of get passed around, you know, based on who had the best record running at the moment and that kind of thing. So it was really cool. And you know, it was really fun to do. And my cousin Eric was the one that got tickets for this. I don't even remember how he got them. All I remember is we got amazing seats, especially this was right kind of when I was right in the middle at the height of my wrestling fandom. And we got really good seats, all things considered. So you know, it was amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I remember that you guys used to. So was this one of the situations where they were just like, "Hey, Steve, we got tickets to WrestleMania. You're going to WrestleMania." Was this like that's how it went?
No, I mean, he called me up beforehand and was like, "Hey, you know, do you want to go to WrestleMania with us? Because I'm getting tickets, so I want to get you one too." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely."
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And this was obviously your first WrestleMania, right?
I think so, yeah.
Was this the only WrestleMania you've been
to? Looking back, I think, unless there were any other, because I know they did it was like 1, 2, 10. I don't think there was anything in between that came back to MSG, was there?
No. It was 1, 2, 10, 20, and then 29. So yeah. Yeah, so that would have been
probably, this would have been, I think, even my one and only WrestleMania.
There you go. And what would you say, I guess, before we get into your thoughts on the show, one of the things we talked about, you know, take us through that day for you. You know, Alex had talked about going to Toys R Us Times Square, seeing some of the access situations there and some of the access things. Is there anything you remember kind of for that WrestleMania hype?
I don't really remember any of the WrestleMania hype. I remember as a personal story because we were actually with a couple of my cousin's friends as well. And they're all, I would say at that point, 4 or 5 years older than I am.
Okay.
So I was, you know, let's see, 2004 would have made me what? 16, 17 maybe?
About 16,
something like that. 16, yeah. So, and then everybody else was, you know, like 20, 21, like college age, and, you know, past that. And I was this little high school, you know, punk walking around with them. I'm thinking that was cool stuff. And we had went into, I think there was still that Kenny Rogers in, it was either Kenny Rogers or it was a Wendy's at that point in Penn Station. And we, you know, were like ordering food and stuff beforehand. And one of my cousin's friends just was like, "Oh, hey, do you guys, you know, like want like a chicken nugget or anything?" And I proceeded to just bear claw the entire box over to me and just start everything down. And he had this just look of like utter shock. Like, I can't believe this punk kid just took all of my food. Like, who do you think he is? And to this day, he still gets on me about it. To the fact that for my cousin's wedding last year, he even said something to me about it when he saw me. You know, for the first time in like 5 or 6 years, he was like, "Do you remember when we went to WrestleMania?" And before I even he finished, I was like, "Yeah, I remember. No regrets."
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool. What's up, by the way, to Roman Reigns 3415 Gaming saying hello over in the chat. Good to see him in there. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I guess taking us back here, you said you had good seats for the show. What would you say, you know, when you think back to WrestleMania 20, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I mean, it's funny because the first thing that comes to my mind was how hyped I was for the Brock Lesnar Goldberg match and how disappointed we all were. Because I mean, you know, Goldberg was my guy growing up in WCW, you know, as a Jewish kid growing up, you don't get a lot of representation there.
That's a good point.
and he was my uncle's favorite wrestler, hands down, all throughout WCW and his huge undefeated streak in WCW. Because I was more of a WWE fan, I didn't really watch WCW as much. And then with the whole, takeover and everything, Goldberg was one of those holdovers that didn't come over right away. So it was a big deal when he came to WWE. I really remember that very vividly and saying, oh, yeah, I can finally see Goldberg in all of his glory. And he had a very lackluster run in WWE. But I remember, all right, like Brock Lesnar, he's this other big guy. And, being a 16-year-old, I was really drawn to, when I was growing up, I always, liked the guys that were a little bit more theatrical, that had that, that persona around, so I was drawn to Undertaker. I was drawn to Kane. I was even drawn to Brock Lesnar a little bit with that, that mentality and everything. So with this, on paper, I'm looking at saying Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg. This is going to be a great match. This is going to be the match that I want to see. And then, I started picking up little bits and pieces here and there about, Brock is leaving and Goldberg's leaving, and this is going to be their last match and everything. Thinking, all right, well, at least they're going to go out on top, right? Like they're going to make it worth something. And then like more and more, and like the anxiety built and built, and then they were announced Stone Cold as the ref, and it was like, how can this get any better?
Like
this is going to be amazing.
Of all of those generations coming together.
Right, exactly. And it just, the energy in the crowd was so, it was so against them, and I'd never had that pure visceral, like you get the heel hate, usually when John Cena, when you guys were talking about it, when John Cena would ever come to MSG, he'd get booed until the end of the match, and that was more of, it was more just because, MSG is weird, but you also get those heels that would come out and, you're supposed to boo them and you're supposed to throw heat on them and, that kind of thing. But there was so much there's so much personal animosity between those two wrestlers, and they definitely felt that. And I think they fed off of that negative energy just as much as you can feed off of positive energy. And I think that's it was a vicious circle of, this match isn't going well, so the fans are turning on them. So they're going to say, well, why are we going to give them a good fight, and like go back and forth and all of these the thing that absolutely saved it was Austin. Had he not been there, it would have been a 100% disaster as opposed to like a 95% disaster.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I'm trying here, by the way, I do notice that Steve's not on the screen. So working on that. I don't know why that is, but we definitely hear him. So hopefully we'll be able to get you on the screen here. I've noticed here that there we go. That should work out. You should be there. So I don't know what's going on, but we'll work it out and we'll see what we can do with that. So there you go. So one of the things that I wanted to also talk to you about is this idea that John Cena, we talked about Cena earlier. I know you were not a Cena fan. I know that Cena is one of the deals where Cena kind of ends up being something where is one of the reasons I believe that you stopped watching.
One of them, and I think it was mostly because I kind of, for a little bit there, I saw him almost as a Triple H 2.0 because during that reign of terror that you guys were talking about, to me, when John Cena went on his runs and his title runs, and when he changed the world title belt to the spinner belt and everything, that to me, so I saw that as Triple H 2.0, where the next 10, 15 years are going to be nothing but John Cena winning all the time. And I kind of, I felt like, I was like, why do I want to put myself through that again? Like, at least Triple H, there were a couple of things that were redeeming to him at that point. Me being the person that I was, didn't really see a whole lot redeeming about John Cena, at least as a wrestler, and that was one of those things where I always tried to separate John Cena, the wrestler, from John Cena, the person, because everything that I've ever heard about him is he's an amazing guy. He's a great guy, can be down to earth, does all these great things with Make-A-Wish and everything. So when I almost felt bad about hating him as a wrestler when I would hear those things, but I just could never bring myself to like him as a wrestler.
Absolutely.
And I don't
Steve,
know what it was.
So you know what? Before we even get back in there, if you want to just X out and come back, I'm going to see if that works in getting you on the screen.
I'll try that.
All right. So Steve's going to go ahead and do that because I see him perfectly fine. I know that he's not there, and so everyone is just seeing, it just sees me awkwardly sitting here. But I mean, I know you can hear Steve, and he's definitely giving us some great feedback here. So when he gets on here, hopefully we'll be able to transition that. Thank you for the tip there from one of the people there letting us know. So, all right, Steve, go ahead and try to chat it up, and let's see what happens.
Okay. How about now?
Nope. Now I can't hear you.
Nope. Wait. You can't hear me at all?
Nope. We've lost Steve.
Wait, hold on.
So I'm not sure what's going on there. Nope. He's muted himself, and now let's see. All right. While we try to figure this out here and get Steve back in here.
Sorry.
Nope. Can't hear you, Steve. I don't know why we can't hear you. But go ahead and try to talk. Nope. All right. So Steve's out, trying to get back in here. We'll hopefully get that going soon. But one of the things that I am going to talk to Steve about here is some of these random matches, because we haven't gone through those yet on the WrestleMania 20 show itself. Steve, can you hear me?
Test.
Steve's back. All right. Now, I don't know if we'll be able to get you on the screen. I'm not sure what that is. I see you. So, we'll try to figure that part out. But let's just see here if this – all right. Let's see if that maybe will help us out. All right. So one of the things I wanted to discuss are some of the – some of your takeaways. You were talking about John Cena. So one of the things, did you like rapper John Cena?
No, I didn't like. I think that was probably part of what I didn't like. So even
while everyone else was into it, you were like, "This guy's terrible."
I think that may have been what I didn't like about him, at least at the beginning. Was he's trying. I don't know if it was like, is he trying to be Eminem? Is he trying what is this persona trying to be? Right. And that may have tied it in a little bit. I think probably if I remember, he was probably also early on. I think he may have gone against some of my favorite wrestlers also to begin with. And,
right.
Number one way to disenfranchise me is to pick on something that I like. So if he's going through, and I think, he was Big Show for whatever reason was, I really liked him, for some reason. Kane, Undertaker, like I said, and I think he had those programs with those guys, and it was he was running through everyone. Yeah, so I think at that point I was like,
yeah, no, definitely. I think that, you didn't like John Cena, and especially, I remember that. One of the things, though, that I wanted to do is kind of go through some of the other parts of the card here. I thought it would be fun to go through and see how many of these guys, I don't know if you've looked at this card, but how many of these teams you can remember that were in the 2 Fatal 4-Way Tag Team matches.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so the first one is the Raw Fatal 4-Way World Tag Team match. Do you have any recollection as to who was in that particular match?
Okay, Raw. It was the part of the problem with not watching it for the past 10 years or so is that I guess I don't remember who was on which side. So can you Raw? So
it's the match where going in your tag team champions are Booker T and RVD, and they even had a combined. This is when they were doing the deal where it was the combined world title, the combined musics, and they were doing this for your Kane and X-Pac type music. So
yeah,
for Booker T, it was like, "Can you dig it?" Out of the God, it sounded ridiculous with those two guys there. So those are your tag champs going in. So you need 3 other teams.
Okay. I would say the Dudley Boys.
The Dudley Boys were there. This is definitely feeling like they're way past their welcome, but they are there. In my opinion, I feel like this was past their welcome.
I feel like they were always one of those teams that was like they're they were always on standby. They're like, we need a tag team, quick, Dudley Boys, go.
Let's go to the Dudleys. Yeah, for sure.
We know they were a known commodity, and you're going to get out of them. So it's like if you need a stopgap, go with the Dudley Boys.
Go with the Duds. Absolutely.
So my question is going to then be, are Well, I mean, wow, this was 15 years ago, so I guess a lot of these guys probably aren't wrestling anymore. But are they still around? Are the other two teams still around?
The other two teams are not around. Nope, they're definitely
Okay.
not. Well,
Okay.
you know what? Yeah, no, neither of these two teams are around. One of the members of the two teams has actually passed away.
Really?
Yep.
I guess that really shouldn't surprise me though. What is it? Are they named teams?
One of them is named, and one of them is like the most two generic guys you'll ever find in your life.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, 2004. La Resistance.
There you go. Good job, buddy. Yeah, La Resistance.
Okay. Oh, I remember like they tried too hard to be hated. They were one of those teams that like I know I was supposed to hate them, but like you can't hate someone that walks around with a poodle. Like
No.
I'm not going to get the other one.
No, the other one is Lance Cade and Mark Jindrak. The idea was originally to put Mark Jindrak in Evolution when Batista got hurt, and Triple H campaigned to keep Dave Batista in Evolution. So Mark Jindrak, who basically these guys look like two of your creative wrestlers in WWF.
Like
No Mercy. Yeah. Then the second part is your SmackDown World Title Tag Team Title match, where talk about guys who it definitely feels like they are way past their welcome. Your tag champs going into this match were Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty.
Wow.
We could have been here all night. I don't know that he would have got it. I'm not sure if I didn't just watch.
I probably would have thrown out Too Cool at some point, so I would have been close.
You would have been close, exactly.
So if it's then
the other teams, and I will say one member of the other 6 guys is still in WWE today. You might not know that.
Okay, wait, hold on. So APA.
Good call. Yeah, APA, Bradshaw Farouk. This is right before we're 2 months away from Bradshaw being the world champ, but here he is in this throwaway.
Oh,
right?
That's right.
Isn't that crazy?
So, is he? So he's not. But he's not JBL right now. He's right. He's just
Bradshaw. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's going through the period where he has blonde hair, but he's just Bradshaw.
Okay.
Yeah. They're
okay, so wasn't there were two, there was a team of like, it was like Olympic guys, right?
Yeah,
or something like that.
It is Charlie Haas, Shelton Benjamin, world's greatest tag team.
World's greatest tag team.
And Shelton's still in WWE today. He made a return, so that's the guy who's still there. The other one
I remember you talking to me about that when you were down here.
Yeah. The other one is the Basham brothers, Doug and Danny.
The Bash, were they the ones that were kind of like pseudo like S&M?
Yep, they were with Shaniqua, who is the winner of Tough Enough 2, along with Jackie Gata. So the Miles and Talking Taker there in the chat says the RVD or Booker combo music is one of the worst themes of all time. Also, what a weird set of tag champs at WrestleMania. He's 100% correct. Very bizarre. For WrestleMania specifically, you would think they'd kind of pump it up a bit, but
they would have maybe like given a couple of like other known entities a little bit better of a shot, like as champs leading into it.
Exactly.
So I feel like this is kind of like a we're gonna set up this tag team match. Who are our champs? Wait, who are our champs? Are you kidding me?
Exactly. And it really is. It's like, it almost felt like they were like, oh crap, we have Booker T and RVD. We have nothing to do with these guys. We have Rikishi, who's still sort of over, but at the end of the day, not really so much. So, it's one of these situations where it's definitely tough. And, those two, along with the Cruiserweight Classic, are two of the longer ones. Do you remember feeling like at the time being a part of that show and being there live, that the 5 hours dragged on for you?
No. No, not really. Not that I remember, at least. Um, because I think part of it, especially at the beginning, you're caught up in the hype of this is WrestleMania. So it would be like being at the Super Bowl. It could be, you could have gone to this year's Super Bowl and, watching it on TV, you're bored out of your mind, but going there, you're still like, you're at the Super Bowl. Like you kind of have to be psyched. So, I feel like that was going up to this, we went back to, because the seats, they weren't floor level. They were like, I want to say like the first level up, like the first mezzanine up. So you were almost eye level with everyone.
Right.
So I feel like it went back to, you have these great seats. Like we're right here.
Right.
So we're just going to enjoy this for what it is. When, this could be terrible matches, but the atmosphere and everything around it is going to make it that much better.
And it's one of these situations where, like, now Ari and I, we go to WrestleMania every year, and I think sometimes we're almost at a point where we sometimes take it for granted a little bit. I remember we were down in, well, it's also a little different, because while you had those matches there, that was your first match of the night, was John Cena Big Show. To the best of my knowledge, there was no dark match on that show. Now, if you go to WrestleMania, you're getting 3 or 4 pre-show matches and then that 5-hour show. 8 hours as opposed to 5 hours is a major difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned like taking it for granted, because I feel like that's kind of how I feel living in Disney. Living in Orlando, being able to go to Disney World all the time. I feel like it's a similar thing where if it's your only time at Disney World, you could have like a mediocre experience, but it could still be an amazing experience because you're in Disney World. So
right.
I feel like it's a similar thing, like you could be having a mediocre WrestleMania and it still be really good because you're WrestleMania. This isn't like a Raw or a SmackDown or a house show or an indie show in a firehouse or something. This is like, this is big time. This is Madison Square Garden.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I completely, we just totally screen shared the wrong thing there. Apologize. I'm going to X out that. But yeah, so one of the things I think that, and you were on the screen for a hot minute, at least everyone got to see how nicely dressed you were after I put you over there like $1 million bucks. But one of the things that I wanted to also ask you about is kind of, I guess, your biggest takeaway from this show. If there's something you remember about it, something you remember loving about it, other than, how horrible Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg was, what was it?
I definitely remember Benoit winning. I remember the just like the look of, it was a look of relief. It was a look almost of like he finally got it, and he finally it was finally his. And at the time, there was nobody more deserving of the title than he was, that hadn't ever gotten it before. So it was just the whole atmosphere and with Eddie coming down at the end and celebrating, and just that made everything, it definitely wrapped everything up nicely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was like, it's such a difference when somebody gets that title. It's one of the big things I think that this year is so entertaining, going in about the idea that Kofi Kingston might finally get the world title, because of the fact that it's like, it's rare for somebody completely new to get the world title. And so when somebody does get it and you're there and you're living with them and you're feeling them, and you're like, you're there with Benoit when he comes over from WCW. You're there with Benoit when he has that great match with Kurt Angle at Royal Rumble 2003. And he's always kind of fighting. And for whatever reason, never got to that next level. And so I agree. I think that moment there is something that, you have that 2 times with him and with Eddie Guerrero on the show.
Yeah, it was, I remember, especially at the time, going back and forth between comparing Chris Benoit and Peyton Manning, of like, they were that guy that like, you can't, you're like, you're not going to, you never root against him unless you're, like a Ravens, no, who's in the NFC South, right? The AFC South, right?
Well,
so unless you're like a
Titans South, so you're getting your Titans, Jaguars, down Texans.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. But and whatever. But like, unless you're one of those fans, you're not really going to root against Peyton Manning, right? Like, you don't. There was nobody really rooting against Chris Benoit for this. So it was that he and being the kind of fan that I was, especially having Triple H in the match. I had been burned by Triple H so many times before, especially going back to the thing that I did with my cousins with the picking the matches and everything. Every single time it was a Triple H Mick Foley match, I would pick Foley, wanting him to win. And we were in that era of, yeah, I know it's predetermined. I don't want to use the word fake. But yeah, we know it's predetermined. Yeah, we know Triple H is married to the boss's daughter. Yeah, we know all of these things. We know that he's going through this reign of terror. So, but I still want Foley to win.
Right, exactly.
So I'm going to pick him every time. It was this, having Triple H been that guy that's saying all these other guys are supposed to win, and then Triple H just goes and wins again. It was that, that mentality of, yeah, I want HBK to win. I want Benoit to win. Triple H is going to win. Like, I walked into this thing being a foregone conclusion of, I'm not going to be disappointed when Triple H wins, because, this was like the one time that I picked him to win the belt. I was like, I don't think Benoit is going to win. Chris Benoit is, Shawn Michaels. He already won in Survivor Series. No, Triple H is going to win. I'm okay with this. And then Chris Benoit pulling it out and actually winning, and that moment that moment of relief, because I feel like it almost felt like in the back of his mind too, he was waiting almost for like a screw job thing to happen, where he was like, until I'm holding that belt in my hand, anything could happen.
Exactly.
And to me, that moment of him actually finally having it in his hand and Eddie holding it up too, it was a perfect ribbon on that match.
Absolutely, yeah. Now you're 100% right. I mean, and thankfully WWE has gone back and on the network. If you go and you watch that show, there's a portion of that, believe it or not, when after he's done with Eddie, he celebrates with Daniel and Nancy, his wife and his son. And thankfully that's not on the network, because I did go back and I was like, oh boy, we're going to get, but they've taken that part out, which, is for the better.
Yeah. I mean, and everything that, happened later on is, I feel like, just because I did, hear you guys talking about it. I feel like my part of it, at least, is it was a tragedy that could have been prevented. And I think that's the worst thing about it. Was, this was even long before all of the things with the concussions came out in the NFL. It was before when we were thinking about that. And then when everything came out with, I think it was even, what's his name? Nowinski, right? Christopher Nowinski. He was the one that,
100%.
Yeah, he came out and was basically saying that Benoit's brain at the end, when they looked at it, what resembled an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And there were things about, it was roid rage and that kind of thing, but that probably agitated everything, but that wasn't why it happened. And had Benoit taken his own life and not done anything else, I feel like it would be a completely different story. It would be this moment of reflection, this moment of what can we do more to make sure that this doesn't happen again, get more education, get more, maybe we kind of say, okay, wrestlers, maybe you shouldn't have a headbutt from the top turnbuckle as your finishing move anymore. That kind of thing, and let's take care of ourselves a little bit more. But because of everything that happened, and I distinctly remember it I guess it either happened on like a Sunday or a Monday, right? Like, I think the news broke Monday morning to the point where they had this whole tribute and everything planned for him on Monday Night Raw.
So this happens Sunday night. He's not on the show. Vengeance 2007. Yeah. He's not on the show. And the warped thing about this is that Vince McMahon had passed away at the time. He's dead, right? He dies in the storyline.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So, and like a week or two later, Sensational Queen Sherry dies. And it was at that moment people were like, maybe we shouldn't be messing with this because this is just too much. You know, it's too much. But WWE was like, nope, we're going to stick with it. We're going to go for it. So Vince McMahon that night was supposed to have a tribute. The next night on Raw after the pay-per-view, there was supposed to be a funeral held for Vince McMahon and a tribute show in which they were going to mock up how they usually do tribute shows. So all that stuff you saw there where everybody giving their thoughts on Benoit was all supposed to happen for Vince McMahon, like in storyline. And they were going to also they had a hearse there to bring out this fake casket. And they also had, at the time, Chavo Guerrero denouncing his Hispanic heritage and going as Kerwin White. So you had all these things going together, and unbelievable that in the middle of all that, Benoit dies. But you know, coming out of that, they've improved their drug testing. No more chair shots to the head anymore, and so you've gotten, I mean, some positive, albeit at the expense of something incredibly negative, and the darkest time ever in the business, which says a lot after Owen Hart.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely, yeah. I remember all that. This was all when I feel like sometimes this time frame, like this post-Attitude Era, is sometimes a little bit of a blur to me. When was Katie Vick?
That was actually October of 2002.
Okay.
Right.
Oh wow.
Way before this. Okay. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
That was you know, a dark time for a different reason.
Well, yeah. But like there were definitely. I feel like that was one of the first times when there were weird stuff that had happened before. Like, you know, with like the Ministry kidnapping Stephanie and like that kind of like weird stuff. And there were times when you know, especially when it was still WWF, when they would push the envelope, but like not to the point of like super offensive and like maybe we shouldn't do this. And I feel like Katie Vick, that was like the first time that it really happened. And I remember all the Vince McMahon stuff too. And I remember it was like, no, like this would be big headline news if this was actually happening. Like you can't.
Well, one of the things, you know, I think the problem was when they were doing all the Stephanie stuff with Undertaker, Ministry, all that, it was getting over. And WWE was like super popular. Then when they start losing some of that popularity, end of 2001, beginning of 2002, is when they're like, okay, we got to double down now. Now we've got to go even further. Let's bring in the Katie Vick stuff. Let's do the hot lesbian action. Let's do all this other stuff leading up to a whole variety of all of this like insanity and over-the-top stuff. So, you know, I think that's why they ended up doing it, because they felt like that's all they had to do.
Yeah, that there was definitely that definitely that excess, that like no man's land of like, with like the bra and panties matches and the, you know, like the mud wrestling and like that kind of stuff. Like they were trying to target a very specific audience, and it was the, you know, that like, you know, Monster Energy.
Yep.
You know, like that, you know, that whole atmosphere of, you know, with that and like the WWE Rock and all of that stuff. Like they were targeting a very specific audience with all that stuff, and they definitely got it. Yeah,
that's very true. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, I guess, do you have any other thoughts or live memories of WrestleMania 20?
It was, I remember all of it. And like looking back, and when you start mentioning all these names and all these events, I remember it a lot more. And I remember it was one of those like a lot of it was very surreal. Like the John Cena thing, for example. Like I remember being like, "All right, I'm finally with my people that are going to boo this guy and everything," and it comes
Were they all, throwing up the word life and all
yeah,
that?
exactly. And I'm getting ready, and I'm like, "Boo," and everybody around me is cheering, and I'm like, "No, what are you people doing?"
Yeah.
And with there's with like I do actually remember the cruiserweight because I actually started pulling up the like all the matches and everything.
Yeah.
I do remember the cruiserweight, and that was one of my more looking back, one of the matches that I actually remembered because I was like, oh yeah, like I remember hearing about like Ultimo Dragon from WCW, and I remember Tajiri from ECW and Rey Mysterio from WCW and WWE. Like they were always like my low key like people that I really liked to see wrestle because they were really exciting. I liked the really big guys and the really small guys.
Right.
I like the guys that were in the middle that I was like meh.
Well, it's because those guys look and are presented as something special,
Yeah, that's true. And then I looked and I was like, oh yeah, Christian and Chris Jericho. Like, I remember that being like that.
Yeah, you know what? That's probably like 7th or 8th from the top, and yet that storyline with Trish Stratus, which way she was going to go, that was great stuff. That's a top 5 match on that show, on such a loaded show. That's a great match.
I remember thinking at the time that was walking away that was one of my favorite matches, just because. And again, it was a good mix of storyline and execution, and still like actually like there was a resolution to it. I feel
yeah,
and that was actually like, okay, like this feud can be like good, and okay, but like going back, like I mean, I don't remember the tag team matches.
No.
I do remember the Evolution versus Rock and Sock, because I was really excited about Rock and Sock Connection.
Of course.
I remember Kane Taker because I loved old school. I loved Taker all throughout. But there's just something about that old school Taker, the dead man. It's just that is it must I must have something having to do with, I don't know if that and the reason why the Haunted Mansion is my favorite Disney attraction go hand in hand.
Yeah.
There's something there. I don't know if one precedes the other, but there's something there with, I have a weird thing about death, and I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things from hearing you talk about it, and I feel like is it's tougher to do nowadays with all the internet, all there being so many outlets that are just trying to get all this information and their hands on so much information, is the element of surprise. You and your cousin sitting there and doing prediction sheets as to who's going to win and who can name the best matches. And I'm in a prediction group now, and it's tougher because there's like your lines, right? And there's people who put out the betting lines, and people know that if you check those betting lines, whoever the favorite is probably going to win because somebody in the company is like clued in whoever's making the betting lines. And I'll never forget, we were at WrestleMania 33, and I did not know the Hardys were returning. Turned my phone off, enjoyed the entire day with my wife. And when I got home, I pulled up Facebook, and my entire feed was flooded from comments from people just saying, oh, I can't believe you're going to get to see the Hardys return. That's going to be so awesome. And I was like, that would have ruined it for me, like the element of surprise of being there, of, hearing Alex's story earlier, being there online with folks and trying to get tickets and talking to other wrestling fans and having those established connections. Like when we'd go to independent shows and the guy would always show up dressed as Michael Jackson, or the other guy would just show up dressed as Matt Hardy. Those are like different things you remember. And it's a shame that, there's a generation. I remember hearing that WrestleMania All Day Long was going to happen for WrestleMania 16, and you're going to have 12 hours of WrestleMania and thinking this is the greatest thing in the world. If I'm a kid now and that happens and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to have WrestleMania all day long, and you go online, everyone's wrecking about how much there's too much wrestling and how you shouldn't be excited about that. Less is more, and all this, that, and the third. So, I love the internet, and it's great, and it's incredible that we're able to do an entire 2-hour show talking about WrestleMania 20, and reliving these moments, but at the same time, sometimes it hampers it too.
Well, and I think part of it is this stuff is news, and people want, there's definitely obviously a lot of people that want to know those kinds of things. But to me, that was one of the things that did kind of pull me away from it for a while. One of it was I felt like it got a little bit more soap opera-y, and that kind of stuff went a little bit downhill. But I think it was a lot of the pulling the mask off of, now, I mean, literally and physically sometimes, sometimes like unmasking of Kane actually, we were there. We were at, I think, it was either Raw or SmackDown, whatever it was.
The Raw, I want to say it was, either MSG or Nassau.
Yeah. With the, it was Kane against Triple H. And again, going into this, Kane, one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. And Triple H, that guy that is just the New England Patriots of wrestling, to switch to go back to football again. If Chris Benoit is Peyton Manning, then Triple H is Tom Brady.
Right. Wins every time.
And it's like, and us going in and going, like, Kane's going to win the title, like, right? There's no way he's going to go unmasked, right? There's no way. And then Triple H, and there were a couple of times there when you got the 1-2 and then the 2.5 and then he kicks out, and with Triple H, like, and I remember that the whole weird thing of how like he had like weird face like paint on or something, and like his hair was really weird at the time and all like
a couple of scuffs on his face, and like the front part of his head was all. Yeah, it was rough.
That was mysteriously gone after another week or two.
Right.
But I think that it was those kinds of things that when they started when the kayfabe broke, more and more, I feel like when you started getting the real names of wrestlers kind of coming out more and more, it was, I liken it almost to, there was a thing that came out a long time ago that was on like NBC or something about this magician, and he was like a masked magician that would go in and show how all of these tricks happened and how you would go and make all of these illusions actually happen, how magicians actually did all of these, and he revealed all of these magicians' secrets. And there was a lot of it, I feel like, that happened to me, where it was a lot of the kind of those things coming in, where all of these things that were coming in about how wrestlers do all of these things, and like, yeah, I know that it's predetermined, but with the Tough Enough, it actually brought it back a little bit, knowing how hard it is to train for those kinds of things. Right. But I think for me, wrestling was that escape from reality. Just like why do you go to the movies? That's Robert Downey Jr. and it's not actually Tony Stark out there in space in an Iron Man suit. Just like, I would never say this on our podcast, but going to Mickey, when you go and meet Mickey Mouse in Times Square, he's, it's, who that actually is.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I know, Triple H isn't really his real name. I know Kane isn't really, I know Undertaker isn't really actually dead and that kind of thing. But you would go to get that escape from reality. And I think when they brought more realism into it is when I started to back away from it, because I'm like, I gravitated towards this thing to escape from reality. I don't need more of it in my wrestling. This is my fantasy. I don't need my real in my fantasy.
For sure. No, and I'll never forget Braun Strowman, who's total monster, total badass. He's right in the midst at this time, if I'm not mistaken, of like being this guy that was like a total loose cannon. He's destroying everybody. He's throwing Roman Reigns over while he's in a ambulance. And then I looked over at Instagram and noticed that he's going by Adam Scherr, who is his real name, and he's live streaming himself getting a haircut and taking questions from fans, and couldn't have come across as a more jolly guy that, you'd love to have a beer with. And I thought that was like too much, have a little bit of that separation there. We don't need that much access,
Right. And I think it's the double-edged sword of social media these days, is that it gives you unprecedented access to people that you really want to be close to, like your celebrities and like your other, like those big pop culture figures.
Right.
And it would be great, and I think it's different with a guy maybe like John Cena, who his character isn't so much that, that outlandish character. You can do raps and that kind of thing. And that, if he's posting videos on his Instagram about him rapping and everything like that, if he still had that persona, it would be fine, but you're not going to go and see, Kane in the drive-thru. Like, you don't want to see that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Like, you don't want to see, Undertaker getting a haircut, and that, like you said, if they used it to keep up the kayfabe, like, I remember reading the wrestling magazines, and there was like an interview, like they would have interviews with the wrestlers, but like in character. And like keeping with that kind of thing, like I don't want an interview with the guy that plays Mickey Mouse. I want an interview with Mickey. Like, I don't want an interview with the guy that plays the Undertaker. I want an interview with the Undertaker. Like that kind of thing. So I think that is definitely what kind of led to the decline of it.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And actually, Alex in the live chat said, wow, how did we forget Christian Jericho? Just shows how stacked this card was. And I totally did. It totally escaped me until we mentioned it. Well, thanks so much, Steve, for joining us here today on the show. We'll have to have you back on here when we eventually get to some of the other shows that we've been to together, or shows you've been to as well. I'm glad that, as upset I was that you got to go to WrestleMania 20, that we remained friends through these years. And you want to get a plug in for your podcast that we do together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we are Disney 101 Pod, where you can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram now. Put up an Instagram just a week or so ago. That's doing pretty well. That we talk about all things Disney related. It's not just the theme parks, not just the movies. It's really everything Disney related. And I know there's probably not a whole lot of cross culture there. But it's it's just like this where we go back and forth and we have a lot of fun. So please check us out too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll throw a link down in the description there if you guys are interested. And while you might think there's not too much cross pollination between the two, I will say one of my favorite moments, day or two before WrestleMania, being online for Space Mountain and the dueling AJ Styles, Shane O'Mac chants that were going back and forth, filled with wrestling fans. So there's definitely a lot of people who next year will be there at WrestleMania and will also be spending the week in Disney. So it should be fun.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So thanks again for checking us out here, Steve, and chatting with us. And we'll say so long for now, but you can follow Steve at Disney 101 Pod and check out our Disney podcast if interested. I'll hang here for just a couple more minutes here to finish up that feedback that I was going over in the chat room for F4W Online and those guys. But thanks again, Steve, for coming on for a few.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Always. Anytime you need me.
Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Later, man.
So just to finish up here, let's see who else we got over at SR. So Omega 919, the first WrestleMania to suffer from being just too long. Cut out the 4 filler matches and make it 4-hour show, and it'll be the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Jericho Christian is very good. The handicap match is fun as hell. Goldberg Brock is a spectacle at least. Undertaker returning as a dead man was huge at the time. Eddie Angle is a forgotten classic, and Benoit Hunter Michaels is the greatest in-ring main event in WrestleMania history. A total 5-star match. Much like modern-day Manias, it suffers from being just too damn long, but this is an absolutely fantastic Mania. And Polar Bear responding over to the user Haphazard from before. Not after that execution. This is the best triple threat match I have ever seen. Why Dave doesn't have it at 5 stars plus is beyond me. He's talking about Dave Meltzer. User Curtin Jerker says, it is either WrestleMania 20 or the WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble 2015, one between Cena, Seth, and Brock, that are the best triple threat matches ever. They were both incredible. User Heartbreak Kid says that, because remember, after this, Benoit, Benoit, Michaels, and Triple H all do a rematch of this at Backlash 2004 in Edmonton, which is really the final solidification of Benoit as your main eventer, as your champion there. And they say he says here the Backlash main event rematch was even better than Cena, Seth, and Brock. The way they played off Montreal was great. He's talking about when Earl Hebner runs in and the crowd's like, no, don't ring the bell, because I think Sean has him in the sharpshooter. User Boyd Better Know says the Benoit Hunter Sean three-way was excellent. 4 3/4 star match. Eddie and Kurt was good, not great. Benoit Goldberg was a dud, or I guess as Conrad would say, a dude. Undertaker Kane was meh, but Taker's entrance was a great moment. The Rock Foley Evolution match was all right, but they should have done Orton Foley and Rock Flair in singles matches. Interesting. That would have been really cool. But we did get eventually Orton going over Foley at Backlash, which was a great match. This one I wanted to get to, and I wanted to go over it quickly. PP-CUSPPRAM. That user says, I was there and live the show played better than even on TV. The pure emotion of screaming tap at Triple H, which is actually what Alex had said earlier too, ironically enough, being there live and screaming tap at Triple H while in the crossface was amazing. People forget that Hunter had never tapped out in a situation like that. And when he finally did, it was an incredible emotional moment. Eddie and Angle was a lot of fun. I happened to be sitting in the perfect spot to see Eddie's feet wrapped around the ropes during the final cradle. Undertaker and Kane was fun for what it was. My seat was behind the entrance, so I got to watch the Druids get their torches, which was fun. One of their cloaks actually caught fire on the way out, and they were extinguishing him as he was going on stage. That's pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of seeing Enzo Amore and a bunch of guys from NXT during Triple H's live entrance at WrestleMania 31. Goldberg Brock was exciting just for the sheer fan responses. While we were waiting to get in MSG, it was the hot topic in the crowd of how both were leaving, and basically everyone was saying, screw them. The Trish turn was well executed. Molly Holly getting her head shaved was so strange to see, since I'd never seen a woman's hair match before. Cena getting the big star pop for getting the big show up for the FU was amazing. Orton pinning Foley was the only real quote-unquote letdown, as I wasn't expecting to see it, but I now understand why it happened. Greg the Hammer Valentine got a ridiculous ovation when the Hall of Famers were announced, and heck, I even remember them having WWF ice cream bars in 2004 and getting one with Austin on it. God, I pray that wasn't from like 2001. That's crazy. And finally, the final piece of feedback here from Kid Ryan Korn says the triple threat match was amazing, but unfortunately I can't enjoy it anymore. I was legit touched when Eddie and Benoit hugged. All right, well, that is going to do it here, guys. Hopefully you guys had a good time here. It's been so much fun reminiscing about WrestleMania 20. Thanks so much for you guys for tuning in live and really giving us a couple of hours here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a big thumbs up. Put a comment down in the comment section. That stuff really helps with that whole like algorithm stuff. And subscribe here to Watch Along Wrestling. We're going to have a lot more fun. Next week, we're going to go through this again, putting together the finishing touches right now. We're going to do a WrestleMania 29 retrospective, a show that, again, I had a major letdown in terms of going to WrestleMania 29, which didn't end up happening, which we'll get to next week. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Special shout out to Alex Dorio for coming on and talking with us from the Talking Taker. That was a lot of fun. Really great stuff there. And check their show out. Tomorrow it drops, or late tonight, Undertaker, WrestleMania 18 against Ric Flair, and one of the coolest moments, that double-A spine buster to Undertaker, where I thought, streak over, baby, this is it. But it was not to be. But great stuff. Check them out. Talking Taker. Buy a t-shirt, especially they have their sale going. I'll throw it up on my Twitter at WatchWrestlePod. Support those guys. And big shout out to my boy Steve Johnson from Disney 101 Pod. If you guys are into Disney at all or enjoyed our conversation, check us out each week. Twitter.com/Disney101Pod. That is going to do it for tonight, guys. But hopefully you enjoyed our show here on WrestleMania 20. Let me know what you thought, and can't wait to get back on here and talk with you guys again real soon. Thanks again, and have a great night on the road to WrestleMania.